scenes that almost caused the actors to quit their jobs.
It can seem like Hollywood is all glitz and glamour, but a lot of real hard work behind the scenes goes into making movies. And that work can test a person's limits, not just as an actor, but as a human being. Michelle Rodriguez in The Fast and the Furious. During production on the first Fast and Furious movie, Michelle Rodriguez actually considered walking away over concerns with the way her character, Letty Ortiz, was written. Rodriguez took issue with the way the script had Letty betray her true love Dom and fall for undercover cop Brian. The actress said the betrayal made no sense for a woman who'd prefer an alpha male to a pretty boy. Refusing to betray her vision of the character, Rodriguez put her foot down, telling producers she'd quit the movie if she had to. Fortunately for fans, the storyline was tweaked to Rodriguez's liking, and the rest is blockbuster history. Lauren Cohan in The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead nearly suffered a devastating loss in Season 3. Lauren Cohan, who plays Maggie, contemplated quitting over a particularly stressful scene. The script had her character perform an emergency C-section, and she was worried it would be too intense. But after further consideration, that's exactly why she decided to stay. Recognizing that The Walking Dead is a show about people pushed to grueling extremes, she drew on her discomfort to deliver an affectingly honest performance. Jim Carrey in How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Jim Carrey nabbed the role of the Grinch after making it through an audition process that included earning the approval of Dr. Seuss's widow. But that obstacle was minor compared with what he faced on the set. He had a hard time in the makeup chair where he spent hours each day during the lengthy shoot. Worse, he had to wear uncomfortable contact lenses that proved so painful that the studio brought in a military torture advisor to help Carrey cope. Those techniques got him through filming without quitting, but just barely. In fact, some shots of the Grinch's eyes had to be digitally fixed in post-production because Carrey couldn't bear to wear the contacts. Ian McKellen in The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. It's impossible to imagine Gandalf being played by anyone other than Sir Ian McKellen, who put his stamp on the character in all 6 Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. But at one point during The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, director Peter Jackson might have needed a different actor for the part. The problem? McKellen was acting almost exclusively to a green screen, owing to the fact that his character towered over the hobbits and their interactions had to be stitched together digitally in post-production. The frustration of acting alone eventually got to McKellen, who broke down on the set at one point. Luckily, Jackson did a little emergency outreach to convince him to stick around. Jessica Alba in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. You think you hated Fox's first couple of Fantastic Four movies? Try being Jessica Alba, whose experiences playing Sue, Invisible Woman Storm nearly made her walk away from acting altogether. Alba's frustration stemmed from working with director Tim Story. She later claimed he had absurd demands, like telling her to keep her facial expression flat during a crying scene so she'd stay pretty. After 2007's Rise of the Silver Surfer, she realized she didn't care about the movie business anymore. But things have still worked out pretty well for her. She went on to co-found The Honest Company, currently valued around $2 billion. Brad Pitt in Interview with the Vampire. Interview with the Vampire united Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt in an adaptation of the best-selling Anne Rice novel of the same name. But being part of 1994's most eagerly anticipated Beefcake Summit wasn't all it was cracked up to be for Pitt. Years after the movie came and went, Pitt admitted he was so miserable during filming that he actually approached producer David Geffen about buying out his contract, only to reconsider after Geffen informed him it'd cost $40 million. Russell Crowe in Robin Hood. Usually, an actor who's cast to play a major role in a movie can be counted on to identify with the basic idea of the story. For the exception to that rule, we turn to Russell Crowe, who agreed to star in Nottingham. However, he thought the concept, a role reversal on the Robin Hood story, with the Sheriff of Nottingham turning out to be the real good guy, was fundamentally flawed. Demanding a complete overhaul of the script, Crowe ended up costing the studio millions in extra development, and the result was the retitled Robin Hood, one of 2010's most critically lambasted major releases. Emma Watson in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. For a lot of actors, scoring a regular role in a successful franchise can be the difference between financial security and decades of struggle. While Emma Watson definitely enjoyed the career opportunities from her part in the Harry Potter films, she gave some serious thought to quitting. Watson reached her crossroads during contract renegotiations for the 5th chapter, 2006's Order of the Phoenix, after years of enduring strict studio oversight over schedule and appearance. Although she eventually re-signed, she admitted feeling a major sense of relief after the series ended. Al Pacino in The Godfather. Al Pacino earned a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination for his work as Michael Corleone in The Godfather, and a Best Actor nomination for the sequel. So it's laughable to think studio execs initially wanted him removed from the role. Yet, according to Pacino, that's exactly what happened. He felt their resistance so acutely, in fact, that he later claimed he would have walked off the set if director Francis Ford Coppola hadn't been so supportive during those early days on the Godfather shoot.
How did your favorite Game of Thrones stars really feel while they were filming some of the most dramatic, intense moments in the series? Here are the scenes that the cast absolutely dreaded filming, and a few that certain actors refused to take part in altogether. Warning, Season 8 spoilers ahead. Cersei's walk of shame through King's Landing in Season 5 was brutal enough to make audiences sympathize with one of the most diabolical characters in the entire show. To atone for the sins of adultery, Cersei was forced to walk naked through King's Landing while the citizens verbally and physically assaulted her. Although many Game of Thrones stars are used to wearing nothing but their birthday suits on camera, actress Lena Headey chose to work with a body double for this scene rather than bearing it all. Headey said that the scene would have involved 3 full days of shooting sans costume, and she didn't feel that she could accurately portray Cersei's emotional state if she herself was exposed the entire time. Headey is also a mother, and she noted that stripping down for certain scenes might bring up some awkward conversations with her kids. Headey's usual stand-in, Rebecca Van Cleve, agreed to appear nude in the scene, with Headey's face superimposed on her body. In response to claims that she was less of an actress for preferring to keep herself covered, Headey had to stand up for herself. She told Entertainment Weekly, "You know what, it was really a bit shocking. I've done nudity, I'm not averse to it, but I know I'm a very emotional actor and I get really driven by that." The Game of Thrones Season 6 finale had every fan on edge. The season went out with a bang, literally. Rather than attend her trial with High Sparrow, Cersei decided to pull off an unexpectedly devious revenge plot. She set the entire sept of Baelor ablaze with wildfire, a highly flammable and rare substance that gives a whole new meaning to the phrase scorched earth. Lancel Lannister tried to save the day in vain. While in a tunnel under the sept, he notices 3 candles burning in a small pool of wildfire, and he attempts to reach the end of the tunnel as fast as he can to blow them out. Due to his injuries, he can only crawl, and he does not make it in time. Actor Eugene Simon said this was his most physically demanding scene. The directors had him spend the entire day crawling, using only his upper body strength throughout. He told Elle, "I had to do it 27 times. By the end of it, I was covered in sweat from exhaustion. By the time I got to the fire, I felt like the Hulk." Euron Greyjoy is one of the most frightening characters of Game of Thrones. He has no moral compass, and there seems to be nothing he won't do in pursuit of the power that he craves. Even among the other ruthless Game of Thrones characters, Euron possesses a unique form of evil. Actor Pilu Asbæk plays the role perfectly, yet in real life, Asbæk is nowhere near as frightening. In fact, he was actually intimidated by one scene in particular. In the Game of Thrones universe, every kingdom has their own unique rituals and ceremonies. When a new king is crowned in the Iron Islands, a drowning ceremony is part of their initiation. Of course, filming something like this is complicated, and there's no way that the cast and crew are going to get it right in one take. Asbæk said that filming the drowning scene was quite a struggle. After all, it's not easy to act while you're freezing cold and unable to breathe. Asbæk told Elle, "When you're underwater and there's a guy pushing you down and it's very, very cold, it's one of those challenges that you have to accept as an actor. This is what it is. This is what we're going to do." Wearing unique costumes and makeup on set is just part of the deal on Game of Thrones. To create some of the special aesthetic effects, actors have had to wear colored contacts and prosthetic lenses. For example, after Arya Stark goes temporarily blind in Season 5, Maisie Williams had to wear colored contact lenses for a few episodes until her sight was restored. But she's not the only character on set who had to spend a little time in the dark. For Meryn Trant's death scene in Season 5, the cast and crew began shooting early in the morning, and actor Ian Beattie recalls getting prosthetics in his eye around 9 AM that day. Unfortunately, the prosthetics basically left him blind for a full day of shooting, and he had to leave them in for a full 12 hours. He says that all he remembers from that particular day of shooting was total darkness from morning until night. He remembers his death scene as his biggest challenge on set. Beattie told Elle, "It was in many ways quite a surreal day. It was very technical, but Maisie and I had worked it out in rehearsals and we were ready." Tormund Giantsbane is a fan favorite on Game of Thrones. Although he is arguably a relatively minor character, he's gotten more and more screen time throughout his tenure on the series, to the point that it raised something of a fan uproar when his fate was left ambiguous in the Season 7 finale. He's a tough character and maybe gruff at times, but beneath his rough exterior, there's something endearing about him. Actor Christopher Hivju has appeared in plenty of crazy battle scenes where it seems like it's hard to keep track of anything happening on screen. Hivju admits that by the time he was scheduled to shoot the season 7 finale, he'd had enough of working with the whites. The whites that audiences see are actually a small crowd of extras, with the majority added digitally in post-production. Regardless, the actors had to keep up with quick choreography, and according to Hivju, the scene pushed him to his physical limits. He told Elle, "In the beginning, it was tough, but in the end, it became a kind of horrible dance. It was extremely exhausting." Ilaria Sand and her daughter, Tayin, had one of the most frightening death scenes in the entire series, and not a drop of blood was spilled. Cersei handcuffs both Ilaria and Tayin to opposite walls of a dungeon, and then poisons Tayin as revenge for the murder of her daughter, Myrcella, forcing Ilaria to watch her own daughter die while she is helplessly stuck. To make matters worse, Cersei promises to keep Ilaria alive for some time, solely for the purpose of torturing her and prolonging her suffering. Ilaria actress Indira Varma said that she and Rosabelle Sellers, who played Tayin, struggled with their handcuffs throughout the entire day of filming. Since they were supposed to be fighting against them, the cuffs would occasionally come undone, but at other times they got stuck in them. Varma was one of the last people on set that day, and she found herself unable to get out of the cuffs. Finally, a crew member from the props department discovered a solution. Varma said in an episode of Games Revealed, "Literally, at the end of the day, I was like, mate, I can't get it off, can someone help me?" And everyone's gone. Pete from props is like, "I think we need a saw," and I had to be sawn out. Emilia Clarke said that filming Daenerys' final scenes was heavy, but one scene much earlier in the series really pushed her to her limits as an actor. In Season 1, Daenerys eats a horse heart during a Dothraki ceremony. The scene looks painfully realistic, and many viewers probably wondered what Clarke was actually eating. Whatever it was, it couldn't have tasted that great. Clarke wasn't chowing down on real bloody meat, but the feast wasn't much more appetizing.
She has to eat a whole heart. Hope that wasn't my horse.
She's doing well.
The horse meat was actually made out of solidified jam, and Clarke said the flavor reminded her of a nasty combination of bleach and raw pasta. In fact, she said she was so grossed out by the taste that she barely felt like she had to act in the scene. And unfortunately, this was not the kind of scene that she could just get over with in one take. Shooting lasted for several days, and Clarke said that she was physically ill. She told the Mirror, "I ate roughly 28 hearts throughout the days we filmed that scene. Fortunately, they gave me a spit bucket because I was vomiting in it quite often." When Jon Snow and Daenerys finally met in Season 7, it was obvious that there was a spark of instant chemistry between the two characters, and anyone could have predicted that they would fall for each other. Romance was definitely on the horizon. At first, it seemed like destiny. Fire and ice were coming together at last. But in true Game of Thrones fashion, they couldn't simply hook up and then live happily ever after. Unbeknownst to either of them, Jon is actually a Targaryen by birth, and Daenerys is his aunt. Needless to say, actor Kit Harington had some mixed feelings about the scene. After years of working on the show, Harington and Clarke are good friends, and filming a romantic scene together was undoubtedly going to be a little bit awkward. Plus, knowing their characters' family lineage, Harington thought that Jon and Daenerys were making a mistake. Both actors relied on humor to keep the situation a little more lighthearted.
I like looking at her and going, "Oh God, I'm sorry."
Throughout Game of Thrones, so many different characters have come and gone, and there are always several major storylines going on throughout the known world, so it's only expected that some major characters rarely appear in scenes together. For the most recent seasons, this has been the case for Bronn and Cersei, but it's not because the characters don't have any connection. After all, Bronn spends plenty of time with Jaime Lannister, Cersei's twin brother and not-so-secret lover. It's actually because Bronn actor Jerome Flynn and Lena Headey used to date. And the breakup must have been fairly tumultuous because both actors refused to film scenes together. Flynn and Headey nearly had to share a scene in Season 7, when almost all of the main characters convened at the Dragon Pit Summit. However, attentive viewers may have noticed that Bronn and Cersei didn't even share a second of screen time. Bronn made a quick exit and excused himself for a drink before Cersei arrived. Although the two split before late 2014 when Headey began dating a current partner, the wounds must still feel fresh. But perhaps they will have to set their differences aside for the final season. After all, Bronn is now supposed to be leading the Lannister army and working for Cersei, so it will be interesting to see how the directors work around this dilemma.
Horror films are supposed to scare us. It's right there in the name of the genre, after all. The whole reason we line up to watch horror movies is to experience the safe thrill of being terrified by fictional objects on a screen. It's all totally fake, of course, but there have been times when the scares hit a little too close to home, and some of the scariest movie scenes have even managed to frighten the actors and actresses, bringing them to life. Here are some iconic movie scenes that scared the pants off the actors in real life. Alien. When that tiny alien burst out of John Hurt's chest in Alien, it scared everyone, including the cast. Although the special effects themselves were pretty shocking, the real magic of this scene is how surprised and terrified the cast appears. These horrified faces are genuine. John Hurt was taken aside during shooting and rigged up to a device loaded with rancid pig organs. The rest of the cast was brought in unaware of the device about to spray them with the organs, or why the film crew was wearing rain gear and protective plastic sheeting. The first take strategically brought the crew closer to the table by spurting only a small amount of fake blood. So when the next take left them all covered in blood, their faces expressed true, terrified surprise.
And there's a master where all 5 of us are like, and we're not acting.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The 1974 horror classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another example of a director strategically designing scenarios to elicit real terror from the actors and actresses. Director Tobe Hooper kept his star Leatherface, played by Gunnar Hansen, out of sight from the rest of the crew, so his mask would be a most horrifying surprise. Specifically, when Jerry runs into him for the first time in the kitchen, his high-pitched squeal is absolutely real. The Blair Witch Project. This entire film seems to have been planned as an elaborate scheme to slowly push the cast into going insane. The directors of the Blair Witch Project gave the 3 cast members cameras, supplies for survival, and a place to meet up. From there, the 3 were essentially left alone in the woods. A few scenes from the movie are from when they were actually lost trying to figure out the next meetup point. Oftentimes, the directors would secretly follow the cast and break sticks or throw rocks around the unknowing campers.
And every once in a while, if it was dark, you'd see this red beam, and you knew it was the Haxon band of goons running around again.
Worse yet, the directors gave them less food every day to make them ragged, angry, and more on edge. And as the days went on, the filmmakers came up with new ways to torture their actors.
And they were setting up, sound loops of babies crying and kids laughing outside at 10 and 4 in the morning.
Basically, it was just us running through trees and going nuts out there.
After 8 days of filming, it's safe to say that the cast no longer enjoys walks in the woods. Prometheus. After Alien, you'd think actors would all be on red alert anytime Ridley Scott makes a monster flick, but the actors on Prometheus evidently thought the director's trickster days were over, allowing Scott to get in one more scare. In one of Prometheus's most infamous scenes, a biologist tries petting the world's scariest space cobra. It doesn't end well.
Cut it off!
A little later, his friends stumble across his corpse, and when they turn his body over, the monster shoots up out of his mouth. As you've probably guessed by this point, those screams are genuine. Pulling pretty much the exact same stunt he used more than 30 years ago, Scott replaced actor Rafe Spall with a dummy, loaded the alien puppet in its mouth, and connected the alien creature to a wire. He then told everyone on set to keep quiet and make sure the actors didn't see the storyboards for the day. When actress Kate Dickie rolled the corpse over, a crew member yanked the monster out of the dummy's mouth, causing Dickie to yelp in alarm. Even tough guy Idris Elba, who was standing nearby, let out a squeal of surprise. The Monster Squad. The Monster Squad is a unique 80s movie that pits a group of kids against some of the most famous monsters in cinematic history. Of course, the scariest of the bunch is Count Dracula himself. Played by Duncan Regehr, this Transylvanian vampire wants to get his undead hands on an amulet that will help him conquer the world. However, standing between the Count and unlimited power is one 5-year-old girl. As the heroes battle it out with the monsters, Dracula approaches the girl, lifts her up by the chin, and angrily demands she hand over the all-powerful jewel. The Count then reveals his red eyes and pearly whites, causing the 5-year-old to scream in terror. While it worked perfectly for the scene, the young actress really was afraid. It was the first time she had seen Regehr in his full vampire regalia, and the sight of those fangs was more than enough to make her freak out. The Godfather. Believe it or not, some of the very best scenes in The Godfather happened in the spur of the moment. For example, remember Vito Corleone's cat? Director Francis Ford Coppola just found that feline wandering around the studio and decided to put it in the scene. And when Vito slaps Johnny Fontaine across the face, that was Brando trying to shake up actor Al Martino and put some life into the scene. The legendary method actor was also doing a little improv in his final scene. Moments before Vito Corleone falls down dead, he's playing with his grandson, Anthony. Obviously, toddlers aren't exactly natural actors. Since Brando needed to connect with the kid, he put an orange peel in his mouth and began growling like a monster. But this didn't sit well with the young actor playing Anthony. The kid was actually scared, forcing Brando to drop the game and comfort the kid. It's a nice touch to a sad scene, a unique moment of improvisation that makes The Godfather one of the all-time greats. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. While Richard Dreyfuss is the main character of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's Cary Guffey who steals the scene every time he shows up. The adorable 4-year-old played the part of Barry Geiler, the little boy who was abducted by aliens. All his reactions seem so genuine, and that's because they are. Throughout shooting, director Steven Spielberg was constantly coming up with ways to encourage Guffey's performance. For example, in the scene where the boy is smiling out the window at the UFOs, Spielberg is off-screen unwrapping presents for Guffey. Later on, when Barry tearfully tells his alien friends goodbye, he's really crying because Spielberg told him to imagine his friends leaving forever. But perhaps Spielberg's most ingenious ploy comes earlier in the film when Barry runs into his kitchen and spots the aliens rummaging through his refrigerator. The space invaders are kept off camera and the whole scene plays off Barry's face. In a matter of seconds, we see the boy go from fright to joy. So what's he actually looking at? Spielberg had makeup man Bob Westmoreland dress up as a gorilla and hide behind a cardboard partition. When Guffey ran into the room, the partition was pulled away and he was face to face with a scary ape. But then the director told Westmoreland to take off his mask. Suddenly, Guffey recognized the makeup man and broke out into a big smile. Spielberg explained even though it was a trick, the reaction was pure and honest. Really, that's a phrase you could use to describe almost every Spielberg film. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. There's no denying that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a childhood classic, but honestly, it's one of the freakiest films ever made. And that's all thanks to Gene Wilder. Sure, his version of Wonka is hilarious and even occasionally soft-hearted, but there's just something off about the guy. You never know when he's going to truly lose his mind.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Of course, audiences weren't the only ones who found Gene Wilder's maniacal Candyman frightening. As it turns out, the frizzy-haired actor also terrified his young co-stars. While working on the film, director Mel Stewart liked to keep all the kids guessing, hiding key details from them until it was actually time to shoot a scene. For example, Stewart kept the actors away from the famous chocolate room until he was ready to roll the camera. So when Charlie and company step into Wonka's Wonderland, their looks of awe are genuine. But then there's the infamous boat scene, widely regarded as the scariest part of the film. Stewart didn't tell anyone what exactly was going to happen during that boat ride. So when Wilder started going on about hurricanes blowing and the Grizzly Reaper mowing, the kids were scared out of their minds.
And they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing!
Actress Denise Nickerson, who played Violet Beauregard, actually thought Wilder had gone mad. Really, that's a testament to Wilder's acting abilities, and while he's appeared in several other iconic films, it's safe to say he'll always be best remembered for this candy-coated creep fest.
Everyone knows that work is lame, even if you're an actor. Sometimes all the fame and money that come with a big role don't seem to be worth enduring a cruel director or a miserable film set. We've already spotlighted a few times where one scene nearly caused an actor to walk away, but it's apparently a lot more common than you think. We explored some maddening moments that drove our actors crazy in our earlier video, scenes that almost caused the actors to quit. Well, now we're back with more scenes that almost pushed actors right over the edge. Daisy Ridley in Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Starring in one of the most anticipated movies of the century is an opportunity most actors would kill for. But the pressure of filming 2015's Star Wars: The Force Awakens nearly proved too much for Daisy Ridley. The British newcomer didn't have much experience before J.J. Abrams cast her as Rey, and Screen Rant reports that she almost quit on the first day when he told her that her performance during a desert scene felt wooden. That note, along with bearing the weight of the biggest franchise in movie history, almost prompted Ridley to get on a starship to anywhere far, far away. Shelley Duvall in The Shining. Shelley Duvall set a Guinness World Record for her portrayal of Wendy in Stanley Kubrick's 1980 horror classic The Shining, but it's not a record anyone would want. The perfectionist Kubrick insisted on 127 takes of a scene where Duvall's hysterical character uses a bat to fend off a deranged Jack Nicholson. By the end, she was so exhausted and dehydrated from crying that she nearly quit. She didn't, but the stress of filming the scene was bad enough that she reportedly began losing her hair. Zoe Saldana, Pirates of the Caribbean. Before she landed leading roles in huge blockbusters like Avatar and Guardians of the Galaxy, Zoe Saldana was just another struggling actress getting by on bit parts. She had a small one as Anna Maria in 2003's Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl, and she said she was treated so badly that she nearly quit, telling The Hollywood Reporter, "It was very elitist. People disrespecting me because they look at my number on a call sheet and they think that I'm not important." It was so demoralizing, Saldana said she even considered quitting acting altogether.
Anna Maria. I suppose you didn't deserve that one either.
No, that one I deserve.
Mike Myers in Wayne's World. Mike Myers created the character of Wayne Campbell on Saturday Night Live, and the recurring sketch became so popular that Paramount wanted a Wayne's World movie. Myers wrote the screenplay, and he was especially excited about the scene where Wayne and the boys pack into the Mirthmobile and headbang to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. But the studio wanted to replace the song with something fresher and cheaper to license. Myers thought the Queen song was crucial, as he revealed on WTF with Mark Maron.
And at one point I said to everybody, well, I'm out. I don't want to make this movie. It's not Bohemian Rhapsody. And they were like, who the are you? Yeah. I said, I'm somebody that wants to do that movie. That's the movie I want to do.
Both Myers and Bohemian Rhapsody stayed. Gene Hackman in The French Connection. Gene Hackman won an Oscar for his turn as New York City police detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle in 1971's The French Connection, but it almost didn't happen. A notoriously difficult actor, he often clashed with director William Friedkin, especially after Friedkin revealed that Paul Newman was his first choice for the part. Things came to a head in a scene where Hackman, dressed in a Santa Claus costume, tackles a criminal on the street. Friedkin demanded 27 takes, and Hackman nearly quit. Fortunately, he stayed and even mentioned it in his speech at the Academy Awards. John Cena in 12 Rounds. Few wrestling stars are bigger than John Cena, so when WWE produced the direct-to-video cop thriller 12 Rounds in 2009, casting him as the lead was a no-brainer. Although his day job is to battle hulking beasts in the ring, Cena apparently isn't fearless. One scene called for his character to rappel down a skyscraper and dangle midair from a rope, but Cena revealed later that his severe fear of heights triggered intense anxiety, and he considered walking away before he even got up there. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio in The Abyss. The dark, claustrophobic sets and constantly gushing water made for some difficult days on the set of James Cameron's 1989 sci-fi flick, The Abyss. But one day in particular stands out for Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. For a scene in which her character's estranged husband administers her CPR, Cameron asked co-star Ed Harris to frantically slap Mastrantonio as she lay motionless on the cold, wet floor. Then the camera ran out of film, and enough was enough.
And she heard that and she just freaked. She just said, hey man, we are not animals. I don't know what you're doing here, but we are not animals.
After leaving the set, she eventually calmed down and returned. Carl Weathers in Rocky IV. A big part of the fourth Rocky movie involves Rocky's mentor Apollo Creed staging a comeback. Played by former NFL linebacker Carl Weathers, Creed gets roughed up in the ring pretty bad by communist pugilist Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren. But one of the boxing scenes got a little too real when Lundgren threw Weathers into a corner, causing Weathers to break character and throw a real punch. Lundgren responded in kind, knocking Weathers out. When he regained consciousness, he quit the movie and sent production into limbo for 4 days. That's when Sylvester Stallone finally convinced Weathers to return. Tippi Hedren in The Birds. Alfred Hitchcock had a reputation for being unkind to actresses, but Tippi Hedren signed on to 1963's The Birds under the guarantee that she'd only be attacked with mechanical birds during the film's climactic scene. But Hitchcock is the king of twists, and he wanted Hedren's terror to feel real, so he instructed crew members to throw real, live birds at her. This real-life game of Angry Birds went on for 5 full days, and Hedren had a breakdown when it was over. She only finished the movie when a doctor ordered Hitchcock to give her a week off to recover.
American Horror Story has been thrilling and terrifying audiences since 2011. Although shooting one of TV's scariest series can be a living nightmare, there aren't many scenes that the American Horror Story cast would take back. But for some of the actors, things on set got a little too real. Usually, when an actor is struggling with their lines, their main concern is that the dialogue won't be convincing enough, but Gabourey Sidibe had a much more chilling problem in one scene of American Horror Story Coven. In the episode Go to Hell, Sidibe's character Queenie chants a Latin phrase that will summon Papa Legba, the gatekeeper to the spirit world. Given that Papa Legba is one of the American Horror Story characters based on real people, Sidibe was understandably reluctant to disturb the actual spirit. According to Sidibe, her concerns turned out to be well-founded. In March 2015, during a panel titled The Television Academy Presents An Evening with the Women of American Horror Story, Sidibe said that as she was chanting, the light fixture in the room started shaking and her back went out. When they moved on to shoot a different angle, the light fixture crashed to the floor. They resumed shooting, and that's when Sidibe felt a finger move up her chin to her lip, which started to swell. Waiting in the makeup trailer for a medic, Sidibe and the makeup artist could hear scratching on the outside, which she described as like something was trying to get in. Sidibe decided the best approach was to pray, which seemed to work, as it put an end to the noises. Once home, Sidibe called her Catholic friend, who gave her a devil-banishing prayer. Everything was peaceful until it came time to shoot the final episode of the Coven season, which required that the rest of the cast say the words as well. When some of the ensemble found themselves struggling with the Latin, Sidibe reluctantly agreed to say the lines again. This time, she felt a finger run from her forehead to her top lip, which immediately swelled up again.
Do not do this at home, you guys!
American Horror Story has treated us to many terrifying supernatural characters, but one of the show's most disturbing monsters was actually a human, albeit one with a psychotic disposition who did not respond well to not getting his way. In American Horror Story Freak Show, it initially seems like the most fearsome villains will be Twisty the Clown, played by John Carroll Lynch, and Edward Mordrake, played by Wes Bentley. And to be fair, you wouldn't want to run into either of them on a dark night in the woods or even a sunny picnic. But it was the spoiled, freak-obsessed dandy played by Finn Wittrock who really upped the violence and sadism, and who audiences most wanted to see get his deserved fate. Unlike Twisty and Mordrake, Dandy's murders weren't inspired by vengeance for a lifetime of abuse. He killed out of petty vindictiveness and to feel a sense of power. Freak Show was Wittrock's debut season of American Horror Story, and one particular scene left him so shaken that he almost didn't want to return. In 2015, he told Pop Sugar that the scene that bothered him the most was when Dandy massacres most of the remaining cast of the Freak Show.
That was actually the one day that I walked home like, oh, I really hate myself and don't want to do this.
He described his mental state afterward as really despondent. However, Wittrock got over that initial shock. He's since become a main fixture of the series and the entire American Horror Story timeline. Like his season after season co-star Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters has been a mainstay throughout the American Horror Story anthology since the very beginning. In fact, he's embodied some of the darkest characters the series has ever seen. On the inaugural season, later subtitled Murder House, Peters plays teenage ghost Tate Langdon, who committed mass murder in his high school when he was alive and continued to do terrible things as a ghost trapped in the titular home. His characters on seasons 2 through 4, Kit Walker, Kyle Spencer, and Jimmy Darling, weren't exactly Tate-level terrifying, but his character on season 5, the twisted serial killer James Patrick March, chilled viewers to their core. They felt the same about the handful of characters he played on American Horror Story Cult, which was a mix of real-life and fictional murderers. By his own admission, Peters has felt uncomfortable filming a number of scenes for American Horror Story and has felt personally affected by the subject matter at hand. In a July 2018 interview with GQ, he shared that shooting such sinister material is, quote, exhausting, to the point where he's questioned his own identity afterward. Peters said, "It's really mentally draining, and you don't want to go to those places ever in your life, and so you have to go there for the scenes, and it ends up integrating it somehow into your life. You're in traffic, and you find yourself screaming, and you're like, what the hell? This isn't who I am." He added that nude scenes on American Horror Story have unsettled him as well, particularly one that happened in season 5. The actor shared, "A strange one was when I was Mr. March in American Horror Story Hotel. I was doing this butterfly razor cutting of this poor girl. It was just horrific and weird and sad. At that point, it was season 5, and it was more comfortable with the crew, so it's like, okay, I guess my butt will be out." There were some earlier ones that were very unnerving. Peters has seemingly taken all the experiences on the chin and has done his best to separate the chaos of his professional life from the calmness of his personal life. The actor will be back for American Horror Story Season 10, set to premiere sometime in 2021, so clearly, any scenes he's regretted haven't kept him from the series that turned him into a household name.
Although the majority of Marvel actors seem to enjoy playing their roles in the franchise, a number of stars have ended up pretty upset with how their scenes or even whole movies turned out. Here are a few things Marvel movie actors have seriously regretted having to do. For an actor who is known as much for his muscular physique as he is for his acting, it might come as a surprise to find that Chris Hemsworth doesn't actually enjoy filming scenes shirtless, especially if it wasn't in the script. Speaking about his time on 2013's Thor: The Dark World, Hemsworth told MTV that his shirtless scene was mandated by Joss Whedon. Hemsworth said, "He just said there needed to be something romantic in there. Then he said, "Chris, get your shirt off." I said, "Well, I don't know. What's the why? What are we doing?" The justification was that it was him coming home from battle, washing blood off his hands. It is what it is.
It's like his muscles are made of Katati metal fibers.
Stop massaging his muscles.
But he was even more upset during filming on Thor Ragnarok, since he felt including yet another shirtless scene for Thor was verging on becoming exploitative. Hemsworth said, "This time around, there wasn't one in the script, which I was really happy about." Then director Taika Waititi said, "No, I think we need a shirt-off scene." I was like, "Ugh, we've done that. Don't make me do it again." I just think it has to be different each time. You have an obligation to mix it up and advance it in some way. Avengers Infinity War opens on the aftermath of a fierce battle between the survivors of Asgard's destruction and Thanos, as the heroes unsuccessfully attempt to stop Thanos from claiming the Tesseract from Loki. Loki's attempt to trick and kill Thanos fails, however, and Thanos brutally chokes Loki to death. Unlike Loki's many previous deaths, this one actually sticks, and the sequence sets a bleak tone for one of the darker installments in the MCU.
No resurrections this time.
For Thanos, killing the god of mischief might have been just another day at the office, but it was a good deal harder to process for the man playing him. Josh Brolin later told USA Today he had been with that character for so long, and he's so lauded for doing it. Tom was so vulnerable at that moment, so choking him out wasn't the most fun thing I've ever done. In the early days of the MCU, Clint Barton often came under fire by fans for being a little vanilla in terms of character development. But Hawkeye actor Jeremy Renner had his own problems when it came to the character's presence in the Avengers. During the movie, Hawkeye has barely been on screen for a minute before he's put under Loki's spell. Talking to Games Radar, Renner later said, "For 90% of the movie, I'm not the character I signed on to play. It's kind of a vacancy. I was limited, you know what I mean? I was a Terminator in a way. Fun stunts, but is there any sort of emotional content or thought process? No." Conveniently enough, Deadpool actor Ryan Reynolds is one of the character's biggest fanboys, and was himself the producer who finally brought the wisecracking assassin to the screen after many years of trying.
Maximum effort.
But it's easy to forget that Ryan Reynolds played Wade Wilson years before his solo film, with his small role in X-Men Origins Wolverine. As Reynolds told People magazine, "It was a very frustrating experience. I was already attached to the Deadpool movie. We hadn't at that point written a script yet. Origins came along and it was sort of like, play Deadpool in this movie or we'll get someone else to. And I just said, I'll do it, but it's the wrong version. Deadpool isn't correct in it." To make matters worse, X-Men Origins was filming during the writer's strike of 2007 and 2008, so Reynolds had to write his own lines. He explained, "So we were in the middle of production. There were no writers, no anything. Every line I have in the movie I just wrote myself because in the script we had, it said, Wade Wilson shows up, talks really fast. I was like, what? What am I supposed to do with that?" That's understandably frustrating, but let's be honest, letting Ryan Reynolds ad-lib his way through the film may be the only thing that made it watchable.
"You look really nice today. It's the green. Brings out the seriousness in your eyes."
Oh my God, you ever shut up, pal?
No, not when I'm awake.
Like his predecessor in the role, Sir Ian McKellen, Michael Fassbender brought a wealth of stage presence to his portrayal of traumatized Holocaust survivor Eric Lehnsherr and his alter ego, the morally ambiguous mutant Magneto. Fassbender gave the character a whole new level of humanity in X-Men First Class. But by 2016's X-Men Days of Future Past, he was no longer happy with his work in the role, and even became visibly embarrassed when scenes from the film aired at the Toronto International Film Festival. In particular, he hated the scene that saw him and Professor X getting into an argument in a plane. You know, this scene.
Where were you, Charles? We were supposed to protect them. Where were you when your own people needed you?
Vulture reported Fassbender as saying, "I don't actually like that performance there, to be honest. I just think it's me shouting. It's just like some dude shouting." The Fantastic Four franchise has struggled with a series of setbacks and disappointments over the years, such as those experienced by Jessica Alba, who almost quit acting after playing Sue Storm in 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. According to Sci-Fi, Alba explained, "The director was like, can you be prettier when you cry? Don't do that thing with your face. Just make it flat. We can CGI the tears in." And then it got me thinking, am I not good enough? Are my instincts and my emotions not good enough? Do people hate them so much that they don't want me to be a person? And so I just said, it, I don't care about this business anymore. Hugo Weaving has played a part in some of the biggest movie franchises in history, including Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the Matrix franchises. So it makes perfect sense that an actor of his caliber would also find a place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which he quickly did when he played the villain Red Skull in Captain America: The First Avenger. Unfortunately, while he was glad to have it a go, he didn't exactly enjoy the experience. Weaving told Collider, "It's not something I would want to do again. I think I've done my dash with that sort of film." It was good to do it and try it out, but to be honest, it's not the sort of film I seek out and really am excited by. Weaving added that he signed a multi-picture deal and said Marvel could have forced him to reprise the role, but also pointed out that it would have been pretty silly to force a performer to show up for a project they don't want to be in. Mickey Rourke was an absolute scene stealer as Ivan Vanko in Iron Man 2. Rourke brought an underlying empathy and humanity to the role that makes his performance incredibly compelling, but he told Screen Rant that the way Vanko was written was far too one-dimensional for his taste. He explained, "The bad guy doesn't always have to be one-dimensional, you know? The performance I tried to bring to Vanko ends up on the floor. That could cause you not to care as much, not to want to put that effort in when you try to make it an intelligent bad guy. This character was hard because he was written as pure evil." Unlike many of his colleagues who love being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Idris Elba has told The Telegraph that playing Heimdall in the MCU movies quickly became a chore for him. After spending 8 months in South Africa making the Nelson Mandela biopic Mandela, Elba added that coming back to shoot scenes for Thor: The Dark World was torture, explaining, "I was actually falling down from a spaceship, so they had to put me in a harness in the green screen studio. And in between takes, I was stuck there, fake hair stuck to my head with this glue, this helmet while they reset. And I'm thinking 24 hours ago I was Mandela. Then there I was in this stupid harness with this wig and this sword and these contact lenses. It ripped my heart out." Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield both may have played Spider-Man within a few years of each other, but only the latter came out of the experience seriously unhappy. Among other regrets, Garfield said that he thought his scenes and character development were all wrong.
I signed up to serve the story and to serve this incredible character that I've been dressing as since I was 3. It gets compromised and it breaks my heart.
Garfield blamed this misuse of the character on the big-budget nature of the movies, as well as the capitalist machine that is more interested in making money than content.
I was still young enough to struggle with the value system, I suppose, of corporate America, really.
Garfield soon exited the role after a pair of films and was replaced by another British actor, Tom Holland, who took up the web shooters in Captain America: Civil War. Marvel took a long time trying to find a version of Hulk that worked for audiences and critics alike before finally hitting pay dirt with Mark Ruffalo's now iconic portrayal of the character.
Sorry. I think I'm freaking out.
Before Ruffalo took the part, however, the studio suffered a serious disappointment with The Incredible Hulk in 2008, which starred Edward Norton as the title character. A few years after leaving the MCU, Norton told the audience at Bruce Willis's Comedy Central roast that he had encountered problems on set because he, quote, wanted a better script.
I thought maybe we should try to make one Marvel movie that was at least as good as the worst Chris Nolan movie, but what the hell was I thinking?
He also claimed that he was invited to help improve the script, but Marvel reneged. Either way, the end result failed to live up to expectations. The bad blood between Marvel and its erstwhile Hulk actor is apparently mutual, too. In a statement prior to the release of The Avengers, Marvel announced, "We have made the decision to not bring Ed Norton back to portray the title role of Bruce Banner. Our decision is definitely not one based on monetary factors, but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members." Long before he played Batman in the DCEU, Ben Affleck starred in one of the lesser-loved Marvel adaptations as lawyer by day, vigilante by night Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil. Unlike some of the other Marvel-inspired bombs that later turned into cult classics, Affleck's Daredevil has yet to find any kind of adoration from Marvel fans. In fact, it's mostly been forgotten, but its star doesn't mind that one bit. Speaking to Playboy magazine, Affleck said, "The only movie I actually regret is Daredevil. It just kills me. I love that story, that character, and the fact that it got f***ed up the way it does stays with me. Maybe that's part of the motivation to do Batman." Unfortunately, when he was announced as the new Batman, it was his performance in Daredevil that had fans concerned about his ability to pull off the role. At the time, the actor said, "If I thought the results would be another Daredevil, I'd be out there picketing myself. Why would I make the movie if I didn't think it was going to be good?" Long before Howard the Duck made his brief cameos in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, he made his full-length feature film debut in 1986's Howard the Duck. This was the story of a parallel universe where an alien anthropomorphic duck is brought to Earth after an accident on his planet. And the whole thing turned out a little raunchier than most Marvel movies.
No more Mr. Nice Duck.
When asked about her role as Howard's love interest Beverly in Howard the Duck, star Leah Thompson told The Hollywood Reporter, "I was the #1 star of it. It was painful." Among many other truly bizarre things that happened in the movie, Howard the Duck also features an intimate scene between Thompson and Howard, which is as graphic as innuendo can get without veering straight into bestiality. Is it any wonder she didn't enjoy it?
Breaking an antique item that changed the future of cinema.
defending the legacy of someone iconic, being a victim of a near-fatal car crash. These are just a few of the challenges the stars of Quentin Tarantino's iconic filmography have had to overcome while filming. Keep watching to find out. Quentin Tarantino's 2015 film, The Hateful Eight, shares a number of similarities with his debut feature, Reservoir Dogs. One major detail both films share is that, for the most part, they each take place in one location. Reservoir Dogs sees a group of strangers confined to a warehouse, while The Hateful Eight places the characters in a stagecoach lodge. While one might imagine that a movie taking place indoors for the majority of its runtime would be relatively straightforward to film, that was absolutely not the case for The Hateful Eight. As revealed by The Hollywood Reporter, Tarantino demanded an authentic environment. Rather than shooting the interior shots in a studio, the director instead chose to place his cast in Colorado's sub-zero temperatures for 10 weeks, starting in January. Once inside the lodge, the director would reportedly keep the single room at a 35-degree temperature to keep the performances and the shivering realistic. Actor Walton Goggins revealed that it was so cold, the cast and crew would squeeze themselves under the set lights for warmth. Thankfully, the grueling time on set led the film's stars to bond and ultimately look forward to the end result. Samuel L. Jackson mentioned to Collider, "We were miserable in the environment. You could see our breath. But the stuff that we were doing was amazing." Set in post-Civil War Wyoming, The Hateful Eight follows 8 strangers cooped up in a stagecoach lodge while they wait for a blizzard to subside. Among the strangers is bounty hunter John the Hangman Ruth, played by Kurt Russell, and his prisoner, Daisy Domergue, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. Unfortunately, the duo found themselves in a scene with painful real-life consequences. At one point in the film, Domergue sits in the lodge and plays a guitar, but her moment of peace is swiftly interrupted by Ruth snatching it away and smashing it to bits right next to her.
Music time's over.
If you pay attention to Lee's reaction in the scene, you'll see a look of sheer panic. And she wasn't hamming it up for the camera. As Russell came to find out, the guitar he smashed was a genuine antique from the 19th century, borrowed from the Martin Guitar Museum. According to the film's sound mixer, Mark Ulano, Russell was supposed to grab the guitar and wait for the scene to cut, while crew members exchanged the priceless instrument for a double. According to Business Insider, these details were not adequately explained to the actor. The museum director was horrified at the destruction of the piece, and although he was reimbursed for the damages, he declared that the company wouldn't be loaning out their guitars to film sets anymore. In 2016, Lee told Billboard that Russell felt so bad about the mix-up, he almost cried when he found out. For anyone who's seen 1992's Reservoir Dogs, it's almost impossible to listen to the Steelers' real hit, Stuck in the Middle with You, without immediately thinking of Michael Madsen's Mr. Blonde grooving to the beat while mutilating a police officer. Although Madsen nailed the part of the psychopathic Mr. Blonde, he initially never saw his character as the villain. Instead, he figured the audience would appreciate him hurting a cop in a movie where all the protagonists were criminals. That is, until he learned one particular detail about the officer. According to Tarantino, during rehearsals, the director himself played the role of the tortured police officer. At one point, while in character, he blurted out that he had a child. Madsen, who had recently had a son, felt immediate discomfort. Knowing his character was supposed to torture a father changed his entire perception of the scene. Madsen said he was also intimidated to shoot his deranged dance and almost refused to do it. While Madsen admits that Reservoir Dogs was important in launching his career, he believes his now iconic role as Mr. Blonde ruined his chances of showing his acting range in the years to come. He told The Hollywood Reporter, "Unfortunately, it typecasted me as a bad guy. I would prefer to be a leading man." Pulp Fiction star Uma Thurman was once one of Quentin Tarantino's most frequent collaborators. The pair had such a professional love for one another that Tarantino called Thurman his muse in a 2004 interview with Rolling Stone. While Tarantino was quick to gush about his leading lady in public, things weren't exactly as they seemed behind the scenes. As it turns out, during the filming of Kill Bill, Tarantino put Thurman in an incredibly dicey situation, which she didn't speak about until 2018. In a shocking interview with the New York Times, Thurman detailed a story about a scene that saw her driving a convertible. An issue arose after Thurman spoke to one of the crew members who suggested the car might be unsafe to drive. She told Tarantino she wanted a stunt person to do it. She explained to the Times, Quentin came in my trailer and didn't like to hear no. He was furious. Thurman ultimately cooperated, but the scene nearly cost her her life. In footage of the incident that she published on her Instagram, Thurman loses control of the vehicle and smashes into a tree. The accident damaged both her neck and her knees and led to a massive argument with Tarantino. The duo settled their differences years later, with Tarantino finally giving Thurman the footage to share with the public. For years leading up to this dispute, he'd had it covered up by disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein. After Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out in 2019, Quentin Tarantino's long-anticipated 9th feature film was met with immediate backlash due to the depiction of martial arts legend Bruce Lee on camera. During one scene, Lee, played by Mike Moe, boasts that he could beat Cassius Clay in a fight, leading Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth, to laughingly disagree. An enraged Lee challenges Booth to a fight, which ends with each man getting knocked down over the course of 2 rounds before someone else intervenes. According to the Los Angeles Times, Bruce Lee's family considered his depiction in the film a mockery. Interestingly enough, if Tarantino had it his way, that mockery would have gotten much worse. According to a Huffington Post interview with stunt coordinator Robert Alonzo, the original script saw Booth winning a 3rd round against Lee, which didn't sit well with the cast and crew, including Brad Pitt. Alonzo explained that Pitt voiced his discomfort with the scene, adding that it was actually thanks to the actor's insistence that Tarantino changed the outcome. According to Moe, Tarantino didn't mean any disrespect by Lee's portrayal. In fact, Moe confirmed that the director was a big fan of Lee's work. He elaborated that at Moe's audition, the pair spoke about the martial arts icon for a solid half hour. Quentin Tarantino's 2012 spaghetti western, Django Unchained, was met with widespread criticism after its release. Critics blasted the flick for its jarring depictions of slavery a few years before the Civil War, countless racial slurs, and its abundant violence. The film depicts Django, a freed slave played by Jamie Foxx, and German bounty hunter Dr. King Schultz, played by Christoph Waltz, as they travel through the South hunting criminals. Ultimately, the pair's journey leads them to try to rescue Django's wife, Broomhilda, played by Kerry Washington, from a plantation where she's held captive. In an interview with IndieWire, Washington revealed her initial hesitation to participate in the movie due to the brutal on-screen torture her character is subject to. She explained, "I was scared about the places I had to go emotionally and psychologically as an artist." Thankfully, she and Fox had previously worked together in the biopic Ray, and the actors were able to lean on one another throughout the taxing shoot. Washington even recalled telling her co-star, "If this movie goes on for 1 week longer, I'm not going to survive it." Ultimately, Washington persevered, even snagging a Best Actress award from BET. However, it wasn't easy. Washington told IndieWire that at one point during filming, her parents and manager came to set to support her. And one of the first things Washington did after returning home was call her therapist. Kerry Washington wasn't the only actor who had difficulty filming Django Unchained. While Tarantino, who was born in the South, told NPR that he considered the film a cultural catharsis, filming was difficult for a number of the A-listers involved. Among them was Leonardo DiCaprio, who played despicable plantation owner Calvin Candy. The actor revealed how difficult he found portraying the inhumane character in a chat with the Screen Actors Guild Foundation.
It was really tough. It was actually took a long time to adjust to. You never quite felt comfortable, but that's part of what we do, you know.
DiCaprio elaborated that his co-stars were supportive. He acknowledged that, in particular, Jamie Foxx offered up his own encouragement whenever Candy did something horrific. And while Foxx had a somewhat gentle approach to soothing DiCaprio's nerves, fellow co-star Samuel L. Jackson had a much more blunt way of supporting the actor. Fox told IndieWire that one day, Jackson outright told DiCaprio to get over it. Reportedly, Jackson's words stuck with DiCaprio to the point where, when he came back to set the next day, he was completely in character. 1997's Jackie Brown is Quentin Tarantino's most subtle film. While the director is usually known for over-the-top flashiness in his visuals and dialogue, Jackie Brown takes a reserved approach, foregoing experimental camera work and choosing to tell a more gentle human story. The film's protagonist is Jackie Brown, played by Pam Grier, a flight attendant who smuggles cash for her gun-runner boss, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Once the police catch her, they demand she cooperate with them. However, the plucky lead has a plan to keep the cash for herself. Filming such an understated Tarantino film may sound easier than partaking in one of his more violent epics, but that doesn't mean there wasn't at least one uncomfortable moment on set. As Greer revealed to People TV's Couchsurfing, one scene of the crime flick sees her character holding a gun to Jackson's nether regions. However, insurance policies would not allow Greer to use a weapon during rehearsals. Greer told Cinema Blend she had to use her own hand instead. Unsurprisingly, this led to some awkward interactions between the actors and some accidental grazing of Jackson's groin. After these uncomfortable moments passed, Greer assured her co-star that she'd be a lot more confident when the time came to use an actual weapon. Anyone who has seen the film will know she absolutely delivered on that front. The late, great Lawrence Turney was already a Hollywood staple by the time he starred in Reservoir Dogs. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Turney earned his acting stripes being typecast as a villain, usually portraying mafiosos and thieves. Reportedly, his off-camera persona wasn't particularly warm either. As the actor's star power grew, he became increasingly more temperamental. As Tarantino told The Guardian, when he cast Turney as crime boss Joe Cabot in 1992, his first few weeks of shooting were pure torture. Tarantino, who's certainly not renowned for his etiquette on set, went so far as to call Turney a complete lunatic. When filming for Reservoir Dogs began, the director opted to shoot Turney's scenes in the first week. After a stressful week of filming, the actor and director's conflict came to a violent head. Tarantino explained, by the end of the week, everybody on set hated Turney. It wasn't just me. And in the last 20 minutes of the first week, we had a blowout and got into a fistfight. I fired him and the whole crew burst into applause. Although the then newbie director thought that getting rid of Turney would ruin his chances at a big break in Hollywood, he fortunately had the movie's biggest star on his side. Harvey Keitel assured the studio that everything would turn out fine, and the rest is history. Uma Thurman and John Travolta's dance scene in Pulp Fiction remains one of the most iconic moments in 90s cinema. As explained by the Daily Beast, the scene was inspired by Jean-Luc Godard's 1964 classic Bon Depart. Reportedly, Tarantino has always been inspired by the way Godard incorporated music and dance into his films. Most of the scene was improvised, and Travolta didn't seem to have many issues with it, but the same can't be said for Thurman. Despite her character's on-screen enthusiasm,
Now I want to dance, I want to win, I want that trophy. So dance good.
Thurman told Variety, I was more afraid of the dancing than almost anything because it was exactly to my total insecurity. Thurman credited her youth and lanky build as the culprits behind her timidity. Thankfully, she added, once the dancing actually began, she adored the experience. In a funny and heartfelt moment at the 2022 Academy Awards, Thurman and Travolta took to the stage alongside Samuel L. Jackson to celebrate the film's 28th anniversary. The two actors briefly recreated their legendary dance, with Thurman quipping, maybe later, we'll have a $5 milkshake.
From scarring their parents to nearly destroying a marriage, it's safe to say these stars really wish they would have kept their clothes on. Even if you've never seen The Room, you're likely still familiar with some of its best bits. Director, writer-star Tommy Wiseau's classic has been memed to death since its release, typically showcasing one of Wiseau's completely bizarre line readings. Perhaps one of the most famous ones is Wiseau shouting at his on-screen future wife,
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
The actor who portrayed her, Juliette Danielle, admits on her personal website that she was initially embarrassed by all the attention she got once The Room became a massive cult hit. By this point, though, she seems to have developed a sense of humor about the whole thing and often speaks highly of the movie's legion of fans. In fact, she even did a Reddit Ask Me Anything in 2012. Of course, someone asked her the question on everyone's mind, which was whether she ever regretted making the movie. Danielle replied, I did regret making it only because of the nudity thing. She also went on to say that what made it so much worse is that Wiseau didn't edit the footage down to a sensible length. She said, I was so mortified. Literally every last bit of footage was used, I think. Sydney Sweeney has been very vocal about her decision to strip down on screen, especially in regard to her Emmy-nominated role as Cassie Howard on HBO's Euphoria. She has rightfully called out the double standards between men and women who take their clothes off for roles, pointing out how much more harshly women seem to be judged for doing so. Sweeney has also complained about how people overlooked her acting talents on Euphoria just because Cassie gets naked from time to time, while those same people watched her on The White Lotus, where her character stays fully clothed, and were suddenly able to give her due. Though Euphoria creator Sam Levinson has faced criticism for what some see as an overuse of nudity, most of the actors who worked on the show have all said that Levinson was willing to tone down or remove an instance of nudity entirely at their request. Sweeney backed this up, telling The Independent, "I've never felt like Sam has pushed it. When I didn't want to do it, he didn't make me." But she added that that hasn't always been her experience with feeling uneasy about a gratuitous scene she had to shoot. Though she didn't name the film or TV show in question, Sweeney revealed, "I've had experiences where I want to go home and scrub myself completely raw because I feel disgusting." HBO's adaptation of the A Song of Fire and Ice novels wasted no time in letting audiences know it wasn't going to pull any punches, particularly in regard to sex, nudity, and all things in between.
What about you, my lord? What's the strangest thing you've eaten?
Do Dornish girls count?
Emilia Clarke was just 23 years old when she was cast as Daenerys Targaryen on Game of Thrones, and she definitely struggled in the beginning with some of what was being asked of her for the part. She said she accepted the role before she knew it would require nudity, and admitted to crying before having to film those early sex scenes with Jason Momoa's character, Khal Drogo. But Clarke also praised her co-star for being extremely sweet and supportive throughout the process. Still, Clarke says that she never had any regrets about all the nudity she had to do for Game of Thrones. That is, until she found herself watching some of it with her family. In an appearance on Live with Kelly and Mark, Clarke told a funny story about how her parents were giving her a hard time over her character not getting much in the way of interesting storylines during a particular stretch of Game of Thrones. Determined to prove them wrong, Clarke sat them down and watched an episode with them that saw Daenerys finally do something impressive, which happened to include her walking through fire completely naked. As soon as she realized that the moment was coming, she instantly regretted choosing to watch that particular episode with her parents. Despite starring in the movie that helped kick off the horror film boom of the 1980s, a boom that contained a whole lot of topless co-eds, Jamie Lee Curtis didn't strip down in Halloween, its sequels, or any other scary movies she appeared in. In fact, it took her first credited film role that wasn't a horror movie of any kind for her to bear almost all on screen for the first and only time. And that movie was the iconic 1983 comedy Trading Places. There's a scene in that movie where Curtis, playing a sex worker named Ophelia, strips down only to her panties with her body in full view. It would be the only time she's ever shown that much skin as an actor, with the only other instance that comes close being her role in True Lies. Turns out there's a good reason for that. Talking to People magazine in 2022, Curtis reflected on Trading Places and that scene in particular. Never one to mince words, Curtis was very honest about the whole thing. She said, "Did I feel embarrassed that I was doing it? Yes. Did I look okay? Yeah. Did I know what I was doing? Yeah. Did I like it? No. Was I doing it because it was the job? Yes." She made it clear that it's something she would never do again, in part because she is now a wife and mother and was neither of those things when she was making Trading Places. Actor Amanda Seyfried was asked by the Orange County Register in 2012 if she considered it a dicey career move to play the titular role of adult film star turned anti-pornography spokesperson Linda Lovelace in the biopic Lovelace. She replied, "Not really. Nudity is nothing to me." Seyfried then pointed out that she had previously done nudity in the erotic thriller Chloe, stating, "When necessary and when it's done well, people don't notice the nudity." But it's important to note that that was a 27-year-old Seyfried discussing how comfortable she felt being au naturel on camera, and that things were a lot different when Seyfried was much younger. In 2022, Seyfried recalled the difficulties of being a teenaged actor in a pre-Me Too Hollywood. She told Net-a-Porter about already being asked to film a nude scene when she was just 19 years old. Being 19, walking around without my underwear on? Like, are you kidding me? How did I let that happen? She admitted that she was afraid of rocking the boat so early in her career, and felt she didn't have a choice if she wanted to keep the gig. Seyfried didn't disclose which production the incident occurred on, but given that she didn't bring it up in 2012 when asked about past experiences with on-screen nudity, it seems clear that she'd rather just pretend it never happened. Kate Winslet is very well aware that she's known for doing nude scenes. In an interview with the New York Times in 2021, she discussed her reasons for taking a break from bearing it all. She mused, "There comes a point where people are going to go, 'Oh, here she goes again.' The break proved to only be a temporary one, as Winslet would recreate one of photojournalist Lee Miller's topless photos for the 2023 biopic Lee. It's hard to argue which of Winslet's nude scenes is the most well-known. In her star-making turn in the movie Titanic, Winslet strips down as her character Rose becomes a model for Leonardo DiCaprio's Jack.
It was the most erotic moment of my life.
But despite the fact that the movie made her a household name and effectively launched what became a very prolific and acclaimed film career, Winslet has her regrets. Shockingly, she's extremely critical of her performance, particularly her American accent, and has said she wishes she could do the whole thing over again. As for her nude scene, she was body-shamed by the media for being seen as not thin enough, which was hard on her at the time. She continues to feel haunted by it, especially when rude fans actually approach her with stills of the scene and ask her to autograph them. Is it possible for someone to regret being forced to do something that was their own idea to begin with? If you're Casey Wilson, that certainly seems to be the case. The Happy Endings star co-wrote the 2013 comedy Ass Backwards with fellow funny woman June Diane Raphael, with the two playing lifelong friends on a wild road trip. At the premiere for the film, Wilson was asked whether she and Raphael wrote anything for the movie that seemed hilarious at the time, but took on a whole different light once it came time to actually film it. Wilson had quite the answer to that query. Staying true to its title, Ass Backwards literally opens with a shot of both actors' naked behinds as their characters, Chloe and Kate, urinate on a sidewalk near a highway. Wilson described the moment where she and Raphael were on all fours as a member of the crew applied makeup to their backsides and suddenly found herself regretting having written the scene. Wilson joked that she would have preferred to use a butt double for herself, while insisting that Raphael didn't need one, but said such a luxury wasn't in the movie's budget. Though not particularly well known in the West, Anna McGann is a prolific and celebrated actor in her native Australia. Her most famous role is that of real-life sex worker Nellie Cameron in the crime anthology series Underbelly. More specifically, McGann appeared in the show's fourth season, subtitled Razor, which focuses on the razor gangs that terrorized Sydney in the 1920s. McGann was nominated for 2 Australian television awards for her performance, and it led to main roles in several more series. But despite Underbelly seeming to be a boon for her career, McGann wishes so much of it didn't require her to be naked. In a blog post about the experience and her journey into acting, McGann wrote, "I had been told that if I wanted to work as an actress, I had to be prepared to get my breasts out." She says that she had initially come to terms with the nudity and sex scenes she had to do for the show, but soon realized one of the downsides to crossing that line. During a promotional photo shoot, McGann was topless but wanted to keep her back to the camera. The photographer got frustrated with her, and McGann says he barked at her, "You're playing a prostitute, and you can't be sexy?" That's when McGann realized that some people were going to see her differently now that she had been naked on screen, and she made the decision to never do that again. Acclaimed historical drama Downton Abbey had a huge cast that combined veteran actors and promising up-and-comers. One of the most noteworthy examples of the latter is Jessica Brown Findlay, who played Lady Sybil Branson during the first 3 seasons of the show in one of her earliest roles.
I know what it is to work now. To have a full day, to be tired in a good way.
But while Downton Abbey marked Brown's first big television appearance, she made her feature film debut in the 2011 drama Albatross. Despite receiving acclaim for the role, Findlay would later admit to regretting the moment in the movie where her character flashes her breasts at a store clerk. Moreover, Findlay claims that she didn't know her bare chest would be visible on screen, saying that she was led to believe she'd be shown from behind for the shot. She told UK entertainment magazine Radio Times in 2013, "To be honest, Albatross was naivete and not knowing that I could say no." Though she did appear naked for the television miniseries Labyrinth in 2012, she declared in the aforementioned interview that her days of on-screen nudity were behind her. Findlay did film a steamy sex scene for the 2015 miniseries The Outcast that showed brief glimpses of nudity, but her body was largely obscured by shadows, blankets, and the other actor in the scene with her, and it's possible it was actually filmed before she swore off being naked on screen anymore. Just because an actor is okay with doing sex scenes, that doesn't necessarily mean they are okay with being bare on screen. A noteworthy example of this is Sarah Jessica Parker, who filmed plenty of sex scenes over the course of the otherwise nudity-filled Sex and the City franchise, but never once got anywhere close to being naked herself. Mary Louise Parker, who played the suburban mom-turned-drug queenpin on the Showtime series Weeds, had similar convictions, though she found herself reluctantly breaking them at one point. During the season 4 finale of the show, Parker's character is having a conversation in the bathtub, and there's a moment where her entire body is visible, though her lower private area is obscured by bubbles. Speaking about the scene after the fact, Parker said she was opposed to showing her breasts and quarreled with the director over it, insisting that it wasn't necessary and added nothing of substance to the scene. She ultimately relented, though she claimed that it wasn't an amicable decision on her part and that she was bitter about how it all went down. If you were a kid watching the Disney Channel in the early 2000s, you are no doubt familiar with the face and/or the voice of Christy Carlson Romano. She played Shia LaBeouf's sister Ren on Even Stevens and also voiced the teenage crime fighter Kim Possible in the animated series of the same name. She clearly has warm feelings about the latter role, as she made a cameo in the 2019 Kim Possible live-action TV movie and also co-hosts a podcast with her Kim Possible co-star Will Friedle that discusses not only the show but the world of voice acting in general. Unfortunately, her acting career between those two periods didn't always go quite so smoothly for Romano. In an episode of Mayim Bialik's podcast Breakdown, Romano shared that she appeared in a horror movie that required her to do a nude scene. She didn't name the movie, but it's likely she was referring to the 2010 film Mirrors 2, which features a scene where her character is in the shower. Romano insisted that nobody on the set did anything to make the experience a poor one, and that everyone was nothing but professional. Nonetheless, the whole thing left her feeling really badly about herself, and it took her some time to mentally recover from it. Some movies make it undeniably clear that unsimulated sex is happening on screen. Controversial filmmaker Lars von Trier accomplished this both in Antichrist and Nymphomaniac by showing actual penetration, although he used adult film actors as body doubles for the real ones. In other cases, it's purely speculation that two actors in a movie had actual intercourse on screen, and the actors themselves either deny it or keep mum on the subject. The 2001 erotic French drama Intimacy opens with what looks like a quite real sex scene, and many believe that to be the case. Interestingly, the journalist husband of the woman in that scene saw fit to rebuff claims that the movie contained unsimulated intercourse in an op-ed he wrote for The Guardian. It's as close as we've gotten to any official statement on the matter, but he also teased that there is at least one sexual act that does occur in the movie that is plainly shown on screen. That act was performed on actor Mark Rylance, and he wasn't remotely thrilled about it. He described the experience and the ensuing tabloid backlash as putting him in a dark place for several months, as well as being a strain on his marriage, and later said that he wishes he never made the movie at all. Sometimes, TV actors find themselves in scenes that produce a very real fear response. From dangerous stunts to jump scares that proved way too heart-jolting, these are the TV scenes that terrified actors in real life. Signing up for Game of Thrones pretty much guarantees that you'll be trading blows and blades eventually. That action component appealed to Ian Glenn, who played Jorah Mormont, the disgraced knight who transitioned from spying on Daenerys to becoming one of her most loyal servants. As Glenn explained to Elle, he loves stage fighting, but he was intimidated by the scale of Jorah's gladiatorial scene, which saw him take on multiple adversaries in the same hectic sequence. He said, "I was pretty fearful. When it's that extensive of a fight, I was fighting various people with different weapons. Things can happen. Accidents can happen." Fortunately, everything worked out, and the scene became one of Glenn's favorite memories of working on the show. He told Entertainment Weekly, "The whole gladiatorial sequence, it was a very hard week, and I loved doing that. So for the action side of things, that sequence encapsulated it."
My little girl was there. You know, she watched her papa work. David said, come sit here, you can call it. She was like, action!
While that may have been the scariest scene to shoot, a different one proved too much to even watch. Glenn admitted to Variety that he couldn't bring himself to watch Jorah fight in the Battle of Winterfell because he was too emotionally invested in the character. Breaking Bad never shied away from grisly and tragic deaths, but there was one that really shook up the cast and crew. Kristen Ritter knew from the start that her character Jane had to die. But the scene where it happened, in which Jane chokes on her own vomit after taking heroin, was rough for everyone involved. Ritter said that during shooting, the crew struggled to watch the terrifyingly authentic scene, and that she had to take breaks because it was too overwhelming. Her mother can't even talk about it. Another parent who struggled with the scene was Bryan Cranston. He said that as he was watching Ritter pretending to choke, he suddenly saw his own daughter in her place, his worst fear coming to life. It's the one scene from a very dark show that still makes him emotional. Jane's death was also Aaron Paul's worst scene. His character Jesse tries to revive her, which involved Paul pounding on Ritter's chest while she wore a special rig. Talking about that scene in 2019, Paul said he and Ritter cried during shooting, adding, "I just couldn't come back from it." Usually, the only person safe from a jump scare-induced heart palpitation is the person jumping out. But Victoria Pedretti is so good at playing a ghost that she even scared herself in one especially heart-lurching scene. In the Netflix series The Haunting of Hill House, Pedretti plays Nell, one of the inhabitants of the titular house, who survives the ghosts in her childhood home only to die when she returns as an adult. Later on in the series, Nell's sisters get into an argument while driving to the haunted mansion, and Nell's ghost bursts between their seats, shrieking like, well, a very distraught ghost. Pedretti told Decider that Nell wasn't trying to scare her sisters. As she explained, it came from a deeper place and a real need, so that's why it's so loud and immediate. I knew it was happening, and I screamed it myself. But it still terrified everyone involved. Her co-star, Oliver Jackson Cohen, confessed that watching it got him too, telling Pop Sugar, "I watched that episode the other day and I was so scared. Nell broke me." If you shudder when watching a character die in a spectacularly gruesome way, spare a thought for the actor living the scene, especially when it comes to the cast of The Walking Dead. The zombie show has delivered some of the most grisly deaths on TV. But maybe the most shudder-inducing of all was watching Jeffrey Morgan's Negan stab Austin Nichols' Spencer in broad daylight in Season 7. Nichols wasn't crazy about that moment either. He was padded with a special chest plate and a bag filled with fake blood and guts. But Morgan had to use a real razor to split open the bag. The actor told Entertainment Weekly, "I was afraid he would puncture the chest plate and actually cut me, because he comes at me really hard and really fast." Luckily, Morgan got it right in the first and only take. While dying was scary, coming back as a zombie was all fun. Nichols revealed, "It was cool to do all this fun stuff with the zombie makeup and zombie contacts." After his character's dramatic death was over, he said, "I just stood up and started screaming, and I just started yelling, 'Yeah, that was awesome!'" Like everyone who isn't an aspiring medium, Gabourey Sidibe prefers her ghosts to be special effects. But a supernatural experience made her think a real spirit showed up for one scene in American Horror Story Coven. In episode 12, Sidibe's character, Queenie, recites a Latin spell to conjure an audience with Papa Legba, the gatekeeper to the spirit world. During an evening with the women of American Horror Story, Sidibe said that as she spoke the words, the light fixture above her began to shake. While shooting another part of the scene, the light fixture crashed to the floor, and she felt a finger running up her chin to her bottom lip, which started to swell. Sidibe and a makeup artist went to a trailer and started hearing scratching noises on the walls outside. They only stopped when the makeup artist said a prayer and clapped her hands. Completely freaked out, Sidibe refused to say the Latin summoning words again, but she relented when the other actors struggled to get the hang of them. This time, her top lip swelled up. One of the first victims of the ever-growing mind flayer in Stranger Things Season 3 was Heather the lifeguard, played by Francesca Reale. In a telepathic trance, Eleven finds Heather in a bathtub full of ice, where she pleads for help before being dragged down into the water by an unseen force. Shooting the first half of the scene was creepy for Reale, who spent a day, quote, drowning herself in the bathtub. And things only got scarier. For the part of the scene where Heather is pulled underwater, Reale told Cinema Blend, "Doing the drowning was actually in a pool with a black bottom, which was terrifying for me because I hate any body of water that has a black bottom." Adding to the waking nightmare, there was a mechanism attached to her foot which pulled her down. She had to hold her arms above her head like she was reaching for Eleven and scream, both without creating bubbles while keeping her eyes open. Reale admitted that it was, quote, incredibly hard, but she said that she enjoyed the chance to do a stunt, and she's game for more. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina leans much more heavily into occult practices than the show's bright and bubbly predecessor. And despite playing powerful witch Prudence on screen, Tati Gabrielle says she got chills when it came time to act out the resurrection ritual in Season 1. The ritual the group performs involves walking deep into a dense forest in the dark, standing on a pentagram lit by candles, and chanting black magic spells to summon spirit hounds. Fine for witches, but the atmosphere made for a spine-tingling shoot.
As a student of necromancy, I strongly advise that you recite the text word for word. The slightest deviation and we could all wind up dead.
Gabrielle confessed to Coup de Monde magazine, "I was super terrified being out there at night, repeating these spells that are very real spells and feeling like we're calling on these weird dark forces. We prayed before we started the scene." Because the show draws on real magical practices, Gabrielle worried that she might be messing with actual spirits. She admitted to Collider, "I get freaked out sometimes when I go home at night, thinking that a demon is gonna be lurking at the corner of my room." Vampires aren't afraid of much, but the humans who play them have very real concerns. Natasha Demetrio, who plays the vampire Nadia in the mockumentary series What We Do in the Shadows, didn't feel so hot when a fire effect didn't go as planned.
I just, this not much scares me, but this.
In a scene in the season 1 finale, 3 Staten Island vampires visit a church where they slowly start to burn up. Demetrio's hands really were set on fire, and she wore gloves covered in a special paste that's supposed to burn without damaging skin. But the fire started getting out of control. She explained to Stuff, "They thought I was just doing it as part of the scene, so it was like a good 5 seconds of me thinking I was going to lose my hand." Showrunner Jermaine Clement thought the accidental effect looked great. But Demetrio understandably broke with her character under fire, admitting, "I definitely ruined it by screaming, 'Help, help,' in my English accent." Not all monsters are supernatural. Netflix's Mindhunter explores the FBI's early attempts to understand what makes serial killers tick. Jonathan Groff plays hostage negotiator turned serial killer investigator Holden Ford, who's based on the real-life FBI agent John E. Douglas. In the show, Ford forms a strange bond with real-life killer Ed Kemper, played to terrifying effect by Cameron Britton. At 6'9", Kemper was physically imposing, and he had a high IQ. He was chillingly eloquent in his descriptions of the violent crimes he committed. Watching the real Kemper, or Britton's version, describe his motivations is spine-tingling, especially if you're in the room. Director and producer David Fincher deliberately kept Britton apart from the rest of the cast to make their scenes even more intense. Groff admitted to Rolling Stone, "To be sitting in this room with him in Los Angeles, all by myself, was terrifying." In particular, Groff was freaked out by a scene in the season 1 finale where Kemper hugs Ford. Groff told Esquire that when he was just reading the scene with Britton, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. That final scene was easy to act because he is truly terrifying. Excessively creepy clowns have become a scourge of movies and TV in the last few years, and 2 of the more famous clown trendsetters are American Horror Story freak shows Twisty and his accomplice, Dandy, who burst onto our screens in 2014. These clowns even scared Horror Story veteran Emma Roberts. She had nightmares when shooting the show, and when she saw Twisty, her perfectly normal response was,
"He's gonna chase me through a forest at 4 a.m. in the middle of nowhere." I don't think so.
In fact, Robert's character Maggie isn't chased through a forest by Twisty. Instead, it's Dandy, who's wearing a different but also horrifying clown costume. It didn't take much acting to get that scene right.
You get this adrenaline of fear where you're like, "Oh my god, I know it's fake, but he's right behind me and it's really scary."
True Blood's Tara Thornton went through a lot in her relatively short life. But the scariest scene for actress Rutina Wesley was the one in which Suki and Lafayette buried Tara, hoping to bring her back as a vampire after she was killed saving Suki. Tara is dead in the scene, but Wesley definitely wasn't. And like anyone with a pulse, she didn't enjoy being buried alive. In fact, she nearly had a panic attack. But since dead people can't breathe, much less hyperventilate, she had to stay as still as possible. She explained to Flair, "I remember my heart was beating so fast. It took all my focus not to move an inch when the final shovel of dirt was thrown on my face. I think I might have actually inhaled some dirt that day." Although it was terrifying at the time, Wesley later admitted to Vulture, "It turned out to be a beautiful shot. That's how you get it. You do it for real."
Which episode of the original Star Trek was so bad that Leonard Nimoy was still embarrassed about it years after the fact? And why did one Walking Dead star almost quit acting entirely? Keep watching to find out. Few people have been in more Star Trek projects than Jonathan Frakes. This means that despite all the wonderful memories as Will Riker, Frakes also remembers a whole lot of bad moments. For instance, Frakes himself called the Next Generation episode Code of Honor a horrible racist episode, and allegedly tried to get it pulled from syndication. However, the scenes he regrets the most aren't in The Next Generation. Instead, they come in his one-episode appearance in Enterprise, where he provided the framing story for the series finale, These Are the Voyages. The problem? Frakes feels that his presence was a disservice to the regular cast of the show, as Riker permeates the episode, appearing at dramatic times that should belong to other characters, like the traumatic death of Commander Trip Tucker. Even the last line of dialogue in the entire series is spoken by Riker, rather than one of the show's regular cast members.
Computer? End program.
Frakes has called it an unpleasant memory. In 2011, he told fans at Central Canada Comic Con, "They said it would be a Valentine to the fans, but all it ended up doing, I think, was hurting Scott Bakula's feelings. He was such a gentleman about it, and I said to Scott, this is weird for me to be on your show. I wasn't crazy about it." Bakula himself has never spoken about the finale, but the tensions were clearly there, as writer-producer Brandon Braga called it, "the only time Scott Bakula was ever mean to me." Though Enterprise is often considered a low part of Trek's history, many fans still have an affection for it, and few characters from the series get more love than Trip Tucker, played by Connor Trinneer. But Trinneer wasn't happy with his character's pointless death, and his biggest issue with it had nothing to do with Riker looming in the background. Instead, it was just the disappointing way Trip died, blowing himself up to take out 3 randos. As Trinneer told Trek Today, "I've gotten out of much worse scrapes than that." Malcolm McDowell played one of the most important villains in Star Trek history. As Dr. Tolian Soren in Star Trek Generations, he was the force that united Jean-Luc Picard and James T. Kirk. He was also the man who kinda killed Kirk, using a delayed response bridge collapse. As it turns out, McDowell thought that was pretty stupid. In 2011, he told StarTrek.com, "If you have this icon of American television, why the hell didn't they give him a spectacular death? Why did they give him such a really paltry death? Me shooting the bridge out or some BS, whatever it was? They should have sent him off in a glorious fashion, and they didn't." The scene originally had Soren shoot Kirk in the back before reshoots. McDowell also found this disappointing, and he lamented that they couldn't figure out a better death. He told Metro, "It was feeble, I thought, because I thought he deserved better." William Shatner has spent decades as one of the faces of Star Trek, and when you're the head honcho of the USS Enterprise, this comes with many great moments, but it also comes with many deeply embarrassing ones. Some of these were a product of the time period, others were a product of Shatner's own ego, but the scene he publicly regrets most is his final scene. When asked by Crave Online whether he was satisfied with Kirk's death in Star Trek Generations, Shatner replied, No, I would have done something else." According to Shatner, the suits at Paramount figured the Star Trek franchise might make a lot more money if they included the Next Generation cast. They also allegedly reasoned that there wasn't much milk left in the original series cash cow, so it was a perfect time for Kirk to meet Picard. And they also wanted to kill off Kirk in order to raise the stakes and signal a permanent changing of the guard. Shatner told TrekMovie.com that he was presented with 2 options. It was either I was going to appear and die, or they were going to say he died, so I chose the more practical of the 2. Between the lackluster reviews and the pathetic death, Shatner wasn't happy. He said, "I wish that there had been more trumpets for the death of the character."
It was fun.
As Spock, Leonard Nimoy was there for many of Star Trek's greatest moments. It's easy to picture him performing a Vulcan nerve pinch or explaining how the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But he was also front and center for one of Trek's worst hours, Spock's Brain, an episode that was deeply embarrassing for him. Though it aired a half-century ago, perhaps no episode has come to symbolize Trek at its worst more than Spock's Brain. The episode sees Spock's brain surgically removed and kidnapped by an alien species. Vulcan physiology lets their bodies stay alive for 24 hours without a brain, so Kirk goes hunting for it. Even for 60s sci-fi, that was a bridge too far. In his autobiography, I Am Spock, Nimoy singled it out as a particularly painful memory, writing, "Frankly, during the entire shooting of that episode, I was embarrassed, a feeling that overcame me many times during the final season of Star Trek." Though Deep Space Nine is considered the gritty Star Trek, it still had a fair number of off-putting moments, including some from no-nonsense Commander Benjamin Sisko. When asked at a convention what his least favorite scenes were, Avery Brooks said it was a toss-up between 2 choices. The first was Move Along Home, in a scene that even the Deep Space Nine documentary What We Left Behind called out as the worst scene in the series.
Alamarine, count to 4, Alamarine, then 3 more, Alamarine, then 3 more.
He knew right away that he'd never live it down, saying, "There's nothing wrong with the melody, it's the hopscotch part." The second was Apocalypse Rising, in which he played a Klingon, which involved enough prosthetics that it necessitated a dentist appointment. But while he didn't want to do it, Brooks had no choice. He said, "The resistance you observe with Sisko playing a Klingon was real." Dr. Julian Bashir initially received some backlash from Deep Space Nine fans. He was seen by some as boring, brash, and, worst of all, kind of annoying. But while the producers had a plan to make him more interesting, they didn't run it by actor Alexander Siddig first. The episode Dr. Bashir, I presume, reveals that Bashir was genetically modified as a child, which made him much smarter. But Siddig didn't learn about this plot development until the day before shooting. He was upset that the producers wouldn't go over a major character arc with the actor actually playing the character. So he staged his own personal protest. He told TrekMovie.com, "I did it the only way that an actor can. I completely destroyed the lines that they gave me regarding the situation." He tanked the storyline, putting no effort into it, going so far as to pin the lines up on set so he could just read them instead of memorize them. It might have been petty, but it was probably pretty satisfying nonetheless. Few Star Trek characters were more grounded than Next Generation's Dr. Beverly Crusher, except of course that one time she fell in love with a ghost in a magic lamp. Sub Rosa is often listed as one of the worst episodes of The Next Generation. An attempt at gothic romance in space, the story, in somewhat reductive terms, involves Beverly falling in love with a ghost inhabiting a lamp. It's worth mentioning that this lamp ghost has also seduced several generations of her family. Needless to say, actress Gates McFadden found the whole concept absurd. In 2012, she told the crowd at Austin Comic-Con, "I was reading this going, this woman became a doctor and she's in love with a lamp?
I love lamp." Do you really love the lamp, or are you just saying it because you saw it?
I love lamp. I love lamp.
Armin Shimmerman is best known as Quark on Deep Space Nine, but years before DS9 was ever conceived, he had a part as a Ferengi on The Next Generation. Not just any Ferengi either, but one of the first ones ever put to screen. And he regrets every second of it. The Ferengi were introduced in The Last Outpost, just a few episodes into the new series. The Ferengi were meant to be menacing, threatening, and anything but funny. Nonetheless, they came across as comical, and the episode is held in low regard to this day. Their credibility as villains tanked, and they were mostly comic relief until Deep Space Nine. Shimmerman blamed himself, telling GameSpot, "No one bears the brunt of that mistake more than I do." So Shimmerman approached Quark as an attempt to salvage the Ferengi. All of my work on Deep Space Nine for the first 4 seasons was me trying to eradicate that original performance from everyone's mind. One of the all-time great comedic actresses, Terry Garr, has played in classics like Tootsie and Young Frankenstein. She also played Roberta Lincoln in Assignment Earth, the Season 2 finale of the original series. It was one of her first speaking parts, and she later credited it in her autobiography with getting her real roles. That doesn't mean she liked it or even wants to talk about it, though. Gene Roddenberry intended Assignment Earth to be a backdoor pilot to a new series, hedging his bets in case Star Trek got canceled. Ultimately, Star Trek got a 3rd season and Assignment Earth remained a standalone episode. But years later, when interviewed for Starlog magazine, Garr said, "I did that years ago, and I mostly deny I ever did it." Exactly why Garr disliked the experience so much is unclear, though producer Bob Justman said in his book Inside Star Trek that Gene Roddenberry pushed to have Garr wear a shorter and more revealing skirt. Whatever happened, it was enough to sour her on the whole franchise and fan base. She was glad Assignment Earth never launched, saying, "Otherwise, all I would get would be Star Trek questions for the rest of my natural life, and probably my unnatural life. You ever see those people who are Star Trek fans? The same people who go to swap meets." You'd be forgiven for missing the fact that Jeffrey Dean Morgan appeared as an alien in the Enterprise episode Carpenter Street, as he was completely buried in makeup. And he hated the entire experience. In 2003, Morgan's career wasn't doing so well, and he needed work, so he took a role in Enterprise. He expected to do some line readings. Instead, he got 4 hours a day in a makeup chair. He told Entertainment Weekly, "I remember them dripping goop on my face, and I had straw sticking out of my nose. I couldn't eat lunch, I was claustrophobic, I'd go home in tears." The whole process was so miserable he almost quit acting. Luckily he didn't, and the job helped him stay afloat until better things came along.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Garrett Wang doesn't openly regret many scenes he played as Ensign Harry Kim. Rather, he regrets the scenes he didn't get to play, namely any as a senior officer. Wang still takes umbrage with the fact that Harry remained an ensign throughout Star Trek Voyager, telling StarTrek.com, "I mean, come on, people. Kim was probed, beaten, tortured, and held the distinction of being the first Voyager crew member to die and come back to life. What more does a guy have to do to get promoted to lieutenant for frack's sake?" Wang called writer-producer Brandon Braga during the 4th season to ask why Harry hadn't been promoted. He was told, quote, "Well, somebody's gotta be the ensign."
Hauntings, burials, and the battle from hell. Sometimes TV frightens actors more than the audience. As all of the murder, war, and manipulation comes to a head toward the end of the 8-season run of HBO's epic fantasy Game of Thrones, the contestants for the Iron Throne become ever more vicious in their play for power. The second-to-last episode of Season 6, The Battle of the Bastards, depicts a bloody, pivotal battle for Winterfell, fought by the armies of would-be King in the North Jon Snow and the cruel upstart Ramsay Bolton.
You're going to die tomorrow, Lord Bolton. Sleep well.
Filming that elaborate, ambitious battle required 25 shooting days, 500 extras, 600 crew members, and 70 horses. This means that pretty much everything that is depicted on the screen was very real, much to the terror of the actor who portrayed Jon Snow, Kit Harington. At one point in the episode, a horde of enemy soldiers moves in for the kill, and it wasn't done with CGI. There really was a large group of men running straight at, into, and on top of Harington. He's buried under bodies at one point, all of which was a bit too much for the actor. He later told the Belfast Telegraph, "I've got a few fears, spiders being one of them, but the worst is my claustrophobia. I'm mortally afraid of crowds. I panic. It was one of the most terrifying things and most uncomfortable." Debuting on the CW in January 2017, the very first sequence in the very first episode of Riverdale makes it clear that the show will play out much differently to the old-fashioned Archie comics upon which it's based. After some ominous establishing shots of the titular city, the action switches to the banks of the Sweetwater River, where identical twins Jason and Cheryl Blossom board a small boat and head out on the water, a journey that will leave Jason dead and his sister traumatized. Even shooting that scene was tough for Madeline Petch, who has a pronounced phobia of deep, large bodies of water. She later told Glamour, "I assumed they'd use a stunt double in the boat. When I got to set, they were like, 'So we're gonna put you in a wetsuit.'" It didn't help that co-star Travers Steins was in charge of operating the boat, something he'd never done before. Petch said, "I was having a panic attack. No one knew I was freaking out. I was terrified of stepping in the boat, but then I got in and Trevor was amazing. It was great therapy, but I was still terrified." Like many people, Gabourey Sidibe prefers her ghost to remain as little more than special effects. But a supernatural experience made her think a real spirit showed up for one scene in American Horror Story Coven. In episode 12, Sidibe's character Queenie recites a Latin spell to conjure an audience with Papa Legba, the gatekeeper to the spirit world. During an evening with the women of American Horror Story, Sidibe said that as she spoke the words, the light fixture above her started to shake, and she felt like she couldn't move. While shooting another part of the scene, the light fixture crashed to the floor, and she felt a finger running up her chin to her bottom lip, which started to swell. Sidibe and a makeup artist went to a trailer to wait for medical treatment, and suddenly began to hear scratching noises on the walls outside. They only stopped when a makeup artist said a prayer and clapped her hands. Perhaps understandably, Sidibe refused to say the Latin summoning words again, but she relented for the final episode when the other actors struggled to get the hang of them. This time, her top lip swelled up. As she herself said,
"Do not do this at home, you guys!"
The relationship between vampire killer Buffy Summers and the ageless, vicious vampire Spike and Buffy the Vampire Slayer was all kinds of complicated. He wanted to kill her, she wanted to kill him, and then he became an undead living experiment with an implant that removed his desire to kill. You know, the usual boy meets girl stuff. But somewhere early on in the Season 6 episode Seeing Red, Spike was still an evil monster who was quite willing to commit unspeakable acts. According to Spike actor James Marsters, creator Joss Whedon urged the Buffy writers to take their worst and darkest real-life memories and put them into scripts. Seeing Red was informed by a staff writer's recollection of trying to win back an ex by forcing them into a sexual encounter, so the script called for a desperate Spike to try that with Buffy. Marsters told the AV Club, "It was the hardest day of my professional life. I was curled up in a fetal position in between takes. I can't watch scenes like that. It was just unbelievably hard. But again, I'm glad we did it. Spike was evil, and I think a lot of people forgot about that." In 1979, the second ever adaptation of a Stephen King book hit screens, a Salem's Lot miniseries based on the author's story about a small town ravaged by vampires. Directed by Tobe Hooper, the Salem's Lot limited series featured one of the scariest and thus most indelible TV moments of the time. Young Ralphie Glick, transformed into a pale-faced, monstrous vampire, floats outside the bedroom window of his brother Danny and scratches at the glass, imploring him to let him in. The look in Ron Scribner's eyes came not from an actor trying to best convey his character, but some rather extreme discomfort. He later told Vanity Fair, "It was probably the pain from the contact lenses digging into my eyeballs." Danny ultimately doesn't survive his brother's vampirism, and this led to Brad Savage having to film a graveyard scene as an undead boy. Apparently dead, Danny hangs out in a coffin until he can drink the blood of the local gravedigger. Savage later said, "Honestly, out of my whole childhood career, that was the creepiest experience. They literally put me in a coffin and lowered me down 8-10 feet into a hole. That was probably the most damage done to my psyche." Acting can be demanding on the body and the mind. For these stars, however, things got so stomach-churning on set they lost their lunch while filming. When an actor unexpectedly sends chunks flying on the set of a horror movie, it might not come as much of a surprise. But unexpected oral expulsions can occur on the set of just about any genre of film, as Zoe Deutsch proved while making the Netflix romantic comedy Set It Up. Speaking of Hello Giggles in 2018, Deutsch talked about her commitment to the role of Harper, a disgruntled assistant looking to get even with her overbearing boss. For a big pizza eating scene, she even went so far as to devour 4 full pizzas rather than spit out each bite between takes, as is common when filming such a scene. Expressing her initial excitement about the scene, she explained, "It was an awesome opportunity to eat pizza, which if you know me, you know I love pizza and I love pasta." She even asked for a specific pizza from a favorite restaurant. But while director Claire Scanlon implored her to use a spit bucket, Deutsch refused. Before long, things went south. As Deutsch explained, "I threw up violently halfway through the scene, and then I had to proceed to be very close to Glenn Powell, who now, I think, looks at me in a very different light. So that was something that happened."
I'm a lady.
It's one thing when an actor wants to overindulge in filming a food scene, but it's an entirely different matter when it isn't the actor's choice. In fact, in the case of a now famous scene in The Wolf of Wall Street, one actor's major upchuck happened after a co-star flipped the script in an impromptu moment of improvisation. That star was Leonardo DiCaprio, and it happened when filming a scene when he and co-star Jonah Hill were eating a selection of sushi. While appearing on Conan, director Martin Scorsese explained that the scene as written had Hill's character scooping up the last piece of sushi. But in an unplanned ad-lib, Hill offered the final piece to DiCaprio, who quickly gobbled it up. Really liking the unscripted moment, Scorsese kept it in, but had to film dozens of additional takes in the next few hours. Of course, ever the committed actor, the former Titanic star ate piece after piece of yellowtail sushi. Hill recalled the excursion in an interview with Entertainment Weekly.
He had to eat like all night, eat pieces of sashimi all night. And then by the end of the night, he was on the floor throwing up into a waistband.
Nausea is one of the issues of filming in zero-gravity environments that actors rarely bring up. For example, though none of the cast of Apollo 13 lost their lunch, a cameraman vomited all over Kevin Bacon on set due to the strange sensations of filming in zero-G. Sadly, a similar and more catastrophic event occurred involving nearly the entire cast of Top Gun Maverick decades later. As it happens, Monica Barbaro and Jay Ellis, playing fighter pilots nicknamed Phoenix and Payback, were apparently the only 2 actors to not make a mess of their cockpits while filming those very real zero-G fight scenes. When asked by Glamour who on set threw up, Barbaro recalled, "A lot of people. Honestly, my hat goes off to them because the idea of throwing up regularly and then continuing this job is just insane to me. They had to throw up and recover and keep filming." As Barbaro tells it, her steely stomach was a result of years of dance training. As a result, she'd acclimated to the sensations of being upside down and would practice headstands before flights in preparation for the zero-gravity scenes. Millie Bobby Brown's breakout role as Eleven on the Netflix original sci-fi thriller series Stranger Things made her one of the biggest stars in Hollywood almost overnight. Playing the enigmatic young girl with otherworldly psychic powers required her to participate in daring stunt work as she manipulates objects and fights monsters. One of those stunts caused Brown to vomit when she was asked to be part of some wild wire work. She explained to The Sun, "I don't like climbing, and falling makes me feel sick. I'm really bad at motion sickness. On Stranger Things and Damsel, if I do it one too many times, I'm outside vomiting and everybody's like, 'Oh God, Millie.' I'm a nightmare." On her Instagram page in 2019, she posted a behind-the-scenes shot of the Netflix series where she can be seen hooked up to stunt wires. Her caption made it clear it wasn't an easy sequence to film, admitting that she threw up just moments after the shot was taken. Surprisingly, the stunt in question wasn't part of one of the more disgusting scenes in Stranger Things. Instead, it involved Eleven tumbling head over heels in the air, a dramatic reaction to using her psychic powers to find season antagonist Billy. Still, the experience didn't dissuade Brown from doing wire work again on her 2024 Netflix film Damsel. After starring in one of the biggest movies of all time with The Avengers, Mark Ruffalo kicked off another movie series in 2013 with Now You See Me. In the film, Ruffalo plays Dylan Rode, an FBI agent on the hunt for a team of criminal magicians played by Woody Harrelson, Isla Fisher, Jesse Eisenberg, and Dave Franco. Following the revelation that Rhodes was a magician himself, the film's sequel sees Ruffalo get a bit more action, including a major fight scene. Unfortunately, all that action led to Ruffalo getting seriously sick. Appearing on Today while promoting the movie, Ruffalo revealed that after a stunt where he had to emerge from almost drowning, his co-stars cringed when he vomited all over himself. But according to Ruffalo, Harrelson at least shouldn't have been so surprised. Ruffalo had eaten a piece of the True Detective star's vegan cheesecake beforehand. Already feeling queasy, Ruffalo went into the water for a scene where his character nearly drowns and then emerges from the water coughing. As Ruffalo tells it, he swallowed a bit too much water while submerged and vomited as a result.
All of a sudden, I'm coughing, and then all of a sudden, I throw up.
Sydney Sweeney, breakout star of HBO's Euphoria, joined the superhero ranks in 2023 when she was cast in Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Verse entry, Madam Web. There, she starred as future Spider-Woman Julia Cornwall. The film was a huge flop, both critically and commercially, but the movie's failure hasn't bothered Sweeney. Instead, the thing that probably upset Sweeney the most about Madam Web was the day she vomited on set due to harsh conditions and some uncomfortable costuming. As she explained to Cosmopolitan, "I had a wig, so it was a whole other process. That wig was so hot. We were filming in Boston in the middle of the summer. It was one of the hottest days, and we were in the middle of filming, and I go, 1 second, and I turn around and I just started throwing up." Impressively, Sweeney recovered quickly, reporting that the combination of the extreme heat and blonde wig caused her to overheat, triggering a sudden bout of nausea. Although probably not the same kind that audiences had when they saw the critically balked movie in theaters. In addition to an Oscar-winning acting career, Angelina Jolie is also a director. She helmed the 2014 drama Unbroken, which tells the remarkable true story of Louis Zamperini, an Olympic runner who became a Japanese prisoner of war during World War II while serving in the U.S. Army Air Forces. Jack O'Connell plays Zamperini, while Japanese pop star Miyavi plays his brutal prison camp commander. For Miyavi, the dramatic story of Zamperini's captivity was such an emotional experience that it gave him an upset stomach, which he emptied all over the set. Speaking with Vanity Fair, he explained that to get into character, he had to find the most painful thoughts he could conjure up, saying, "It was awful torture for me to hate the other actors. I had to have hatred for them. When I had to beat them, I had to think about protecting my family. At the same time, I didn't want to just be a bad guy. I wanted to put humanity in this role." Miyavi credited Jolie with helping him get his peak performance through all of his roiling emotions. He reflected, "It's a story that is still painful for my country, but she told me she wanted to make a bridge between all countries that had conflict. She was very persuasive." Jake Gyllenhaal is the kind of actor who can do it all. From critically acclaimed thrillers to romantic comedies, Gyllenhaal is just at home in a gritty Oscar-winning drama as he is in a big-budget popcorn flick. However, he may have found the Marvel Cinematic Universe a little unsteady because the actor told the Graham Norton Show he threw up right in the middle of a scene after Spider-Man himself, Tom Holland, mentioned that he had a stomach bug during the day of filming.
I was very nauseous throughout the day, and in the middle of one of the takes, I threw up.
Sensing a deep discomfort among the guests and audience, Gyllenhaal then jokingly tried to claim that the scene was used in the final cut, and that Marvel had CGI'd the vomit out of the shot. Whether this is true or not, Holland is likely to never let Gyllenhaal live the incident down. The 2018 survival drama Adrift may have floated under most people's radar, but it's a film that star Shailene Woodley isn't likely to forget. Co-starring Sam Claflin, Adrift chronicles the experiences of a real-life couple who were lost at sea amid Hurricane Raymond in 1983. Set almost entirely within the confines of a small boat on the open ocean, the boat and ocean could have been fully CG, but director Baltazar Kormacor opted to do it for real. And as Woodley reported on Jimmy Kimmel Live, that didn't sit well with her stomach.
It was terrible sometimes. The days where everyone got seasick and couldn't stop puking, those were not fun days.
Nearly everyone in front of and behind the camera was affected, with the notable exceptions of Kormacor and their cinematographer. Woodley claimed that while everyone was hurling overboard, it was hard to actually make the film because so many members of the crew were incapacitated between shots. This compilation just goes to show how far folks in the film industry will go to get the shot. History has shown that live-action movies based on video games are tough to get right. So when the racing franchise Gran Turismo got the feature film treatment, producers opted to tell the true story of Jan Mardenborough, a Gran Turismo video game player who embarks on a real racing career. The leading role was played by Archie Madekwe, who didn't have any racing experience, let alone a driver's license. He did at least have time to train behind the wheel before suiting up on the track, though even practice couldn't help his upset stomach. Speaking with Empire magazine, he reflected, "You very quickly realize whether you're built correctly for being a race car driver or not, and I am not." According to the actor, there were multiple times when he'd have to take a quick break to throw up outside of his race car. and while that may sound like a lot for your first time behind the wheel, Madekwe told the outlet it may be his last, as he hasn't driven since. If there's any horror movie set that you'd expect to have turned into a literal vomitorium, it's the set of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a 1974 splatter shocker that kicked off the American slasher subgenre. It was also one of the first films to make its cast sick from the sheer horror of the subject matter and wretched working conditions. The 2019 Joseph Lanza book, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the film that terrified a rattled nation, covers the horrific nature of the production, which was almost as bad as the on-screen horror. According to Lanza, the filming location of Round Rock, Texas saw temperatures reaching 115 degrees, and the film's climactic dinner table scene was compressed into a single non-stop 26-hour shoot. Cast members couldn't wash their wardrobes for continuity reasons, and rotting animal carcasses littered the location and set. Trapped inside the house sets when temps were at the worst, the cast suffered through heat and humidity so unbearable that they had to take breaks to catch their breath and empty their stomachs as well. Soon after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came the Halloween franchise, another slasher series about a masked killer and his often teenage victims. Like Texas Chainsaw, the Halloween franchise has plenty of disturbing themes that continue to scare audiences decades after its first installment. For the fifth film, 1989's Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers, it wasn't the horrific nature of the violent story that upset child star Danielle Harris. Instead, it was a vicious bout of food poisoning. Speaking with Channel Guide magazine, Harris recalled, "There is a scene in Halloween 5 where I'm running in front of a car and through the woods before Michael Myers smashes the car into a tree. In between running and screaming and crying, as soon as they would yell 'cut,' I would throw up." But even at just 11 years old, the actor was determined to power through and give the best performance she could. She recalled, "You've got to work. Production doesn't stop for you. That just shows you how excited I was and how much I wanted to be there and do my job and run from Michael Myers." Whether because of food poisoning, the disturbing nature of a scene, or the queasiness brought on by a topsy-turvy stunt, vomiting on sets is clearly not an uncommon occurrence in Hollywood. But for Johnny Lee Miller, it wasn't any of those reasons that caused him to do the Technicolor yawn. Instead, it was the raw emotion of being reunited with a cast of old friends for the first time in decades. It happened on the first day of rehearsals on the legacy sequel T2 Trainspotting, the long-awaited follow-up from the British cult classic from 1992 starring Miller, Ewan McGregor, Kelly MacDonald, Robert Carlyle, Ewan Brenner, and Kevin McKidd. As Miller recalled to Empire magazine, "I was so nervously excited and I ended up throwing up in the bathroom. It was like, nice to see you. I gotta go vomit." Considering their characters had all once been drug-addled drifters who'd often barf up a lung after a bender, puking felt somewhat on brand for a reunion. However, Miller joked that he hoped his co-stars didn't think he developed a real drug addiction as a result of his literal upheaval.